Good morning, Wabash. Thank you. Quick reminder, after chapel, we're going to have the Bill Melvin fundraiser luncheon just out here in the mall, so please attend. That leaves us to our speaker this morning. We have Dean Warner to give the final talk on our Gentleman's Rule series. So please join me in welcoming Dean Warner and to the podium, his first chapel talk in his new role.
Thanks a lot. Thank you, my Sphinx Club brothers, for the invitation to address the community today. And thanks to all of you for coming out on this fine day to hear what I have to say about the Gentleman's Rule. It's a tribute to the rule that after two fantastic chapel talks by President White and Dean Raiders, there is still much more to say. But as you can tell from my title, which I don't think was enunciated, the rule is a verb, Ethics 101 at Wabash College. I see the rule as an ongoing process, always in need of reflection and discussion. Over the past few weeks, I've been thanked by many students, staff, faculty members, and alumni in our community for taking on the role of Associate Dean of Students of the college for this year, and I really appreciate your kind words and the multiple articles that seem to be appearing everywhere. But I honestly must tell you that this is, I should be the one thanking you, because this is an opportunity for me to serve the college in a new way. And as will be seen shortly, I've spent a lot of time thinking about the Gentleman's Rule over the past 9 years, so that to be asked to assume a leadership role and its interpretation is both humbling and rewarding. The rule is at the very heart of what makes Wabash special. It is at once a shaper of and a reflection of our unique culture. I accepted this call to become Associate Dean of Students because of my intense love for this college, and also because of my faith in the Gentleman's Rule itself as the rock upon which the institution rests. I'm going to break here for just a second to say that the Gentleman's Rule is often thought of as something to do with discipline and student behavior, but it's also about being proactive, about being a responsible citizen. And so I would like to echo the call for you to join us in lunch in support of Bill Melvin, who's battling esophageal cancer, who's been a long-term member of our community, been here much longer than I have. So that's out on the mall afterwards. Today, I'll endeavor to explain how I view the rule philosophically, and to a lesser degree practically, as it affects our campus. I'll be building on the fine words of President White and Dean Raiders over the past couple weeks with a perhaps predictable academic focus. So I apologize in advance if this seems more like a class lecture than an inspirational message. However, I believe that reflection on what the rule means is critical to its vitality, and in that spirit, I invite further conversation. I say that the rule is a verb in my title today because it asks us to continually think about what is right in our own actions, in the actions of others, and for the general sense of justice and good order of our community. These are time-honored questions that individuals and societies have grappled with and will continue to do so. I submit to you that the Gentleman's Rule encourages us to think critically about questions of justice and ethics in our own lives and in a relationship to our community. How am I to be a gentleman? How am I to be a responsible citizen? The Gentleman's Rule therefore raises some deep philosophical questions. As with other huge life questions, if I don't have my Bible on hand, I turn to another key reference, and I happen to have brought it with me. Perhaps you'll recognize the Cultures and Traditions binder. If you're a junior or a senior, I know you do, or a sophomore. And I should say that this is on sale only at your college bookstore. You can't find it on Amazon.com. Juniors and seniors among us have passed through the classical Chinese and Greek modules, and these readings have long influenced my thinking on matters of ethics and justice, and can be helpful in thinking about the Gentleman's Rule. In the Chinese module, we're introduced to three threads regarding the maintenance of a society. I also take these up in order. First, there was legalism, as espoused by Han Fei-Su. According to legalists, societies should be based on rules, determined by a ruler that everyone must obey. This will ensure order, which for Han Fei-Su was a good thing. Sometimes I think order isn't always what it's cracked up to be, but society will prosper because people want to avoid stern punishment. While you may want to scoff at this suggestion, I would submit that in most cases, this sort of legalist thinking actually controls our lives. Do you adhere to the speed limit because it is safer, or because you will receive a ticket, maybe? I mean, be honest with yourself, right? As Dean Raders noted, if he shows up at a sporting event, say against DePaul, students will look nervously at him, and in some cases will decide not to misbehave as a result of his presence, and now my presence. In essence, legalism works because it plays on the fears of human beings, not on their capacity to think critically. Taken to its logical conclusion, what sort of society does pure legalism create? What sorts of citizens does it create? Rules are concocted and followed for no reason except for fear of the ruler. Think about Nazi Germany. No critical thinking allowed. A second and more pleasant philosophy comes to us from Confucius. The central notion of Confucianism is filial piety, a system of respect between individuals. A son should show respect to a father, and a father should show some respect to a son. How they do this will vary according to their specified role. If due respect is shown through living according to the precepts of individual roles, then social harmony will prevail. Rulers even have the responsibility toward their vassals. If leaders do not act respectfully and ethically in their government, disunity and instability are inevitable. Contrast this notion of individual ethics with that of the legalists. How would society be different if we all lived according to the Confucian model? Instead of rewarding reactive behavior based on fear, this Confucian society encourages reflective, responsible citizenship. Clearly, this is closer to the spirit of the gentleman's rule. Yet, is it practical? As with the gentleman's rule, there will always be naysayers who claim that human nature is such that ethical systems are doomed to failure. We need to ask, is Confucianism a utopian concept? The third strand of Chinese philosophy is Taoism, a naturalist philosophy that sometimes is misunderstood. Taoists seek wu wei, or non-acting. This is not so much a state of boredom or inactivity, as we might conceive, but rather acting naturally, without an excess of inner dialogue. Think of players on a sports team who seem to move gracefully and in unison, as if they are in the zone. The emphasis here isn't so much on ethical behavior, though Taoists are not opposed to just action. But rather, this is the idea that when forces in nature and society are balanced, there will be peace. To put a finer point on it, if individuals are truly acting for reasons beyond their selfish desires and in harmony with nature, which includes other individuals, life will be good. Alas, Taoism is at once too simple and too complicated to fully understand. That is actually a Taoist joke. Dr. Blix can explain it. These three strands, legalism, Confucianism, and Taoism, and by the way, I hope you guys are taking notes because this can be used on a paper next year if you're a freshman when you're in C&T, reflect complexities in the pursuit of justice in society. But the most difficult of student behavioral issues, such as dishonesty, academic dishonesty, or fistfights, legalism is the rule of the day. 2 episodes of plagiarism will definitely mean expulsion, no question. 1 episode of fistfighting will probably mean suspension. These scenarios call for a discussion between the deans and the students, but this will not mean negotiation between them. Ignoring the demands of a police officer or a cease and desist order regarding illegal downloads, and 10 of you know what I mean. That was for Brad Weaver. That will likewise not be moments of negotiation. Legalism is not absent in our community, nor should it be. However, I'd like to think that most of our decisions here are based on Confucian philosophy. We expect you to behave as a gentleman on and off campus. That is your duty to filial piety. You discuss the principles of good citizenship with one another, with staff and faculty, and on occasion with the deans. You reflect upon right action so that when you reach our office and we say, "What were you thinking?" I want a poster that says that on my wall. Then you at least have some sort of answer, right? My experience in the dean's office so far has taught me that the vast majority of problems are solved by asking students to consider the implications of their actions and to discern the proper response to situations of conflict. And on balance, you do very well on this score. We are not living in a Dallas panacea, to be sure, but I'm hopeful that continuing our reflections on the gentleman's rule will bring us closer to that lofty goal. Allow me to turn now to the Greek module, and specifically to a reading that may have passed into C&T history, about which I lament. One of the finer pieces of Western literature, in my opinion, is the first book or chapter of Plato's Republic. Here we find Socrates and his friends trying to answer a simple question: what is justice? Though I'm sure my classics colleagues may disagree with my interpretation, I've always believed that question is never really fully answered anywhere in the Republic. But on another level, the question is already answered for me in the first book, to the extent that justice, like the rule, is a verb. That is, there's no static definition for justice, but the drama of reflection in those pages is an invitation to an ethical life. The lessons that I've learned in reading and rereading these lines have been invaluable as I continue to think about what is right in my own life and what passes for justice in my community and in my nation. Hence, I would like to share with you this morning the story that Plato tells in Book 1. Socrates is on the way back from a religious festival with the usual band of inquisitive young men in tow. Soon they find themselves seated at the house of the elderly Cephalus. The dialogue takes the form of a dinner party conversation. Of course, dinner with Socrates rarely involves small talk, so the discussion eventually turns to the heady question of the definition of justice. Socrates, of course, treats the subject coyly, preferring to ask questions rather than to provide answers. Now, as an aside, this may explain a lot to you and about how your Wabash professors approach a subject. I mean, have you ever been irritated that they do not simply give you the answer, and instead they encourage you to go on grappling with the finer points of an issue? If so, welcome to Wabash. Okay? That's going to happen to you. In any case, one by one, several interlocutors offer up a definition, and one by one, these are considered and discarded, at least partly, by Socrates. This is critical thinking in action, guided arguably by the best teacher in history. First up is the host Cephalus. The old man represents the possibility that with age comes wisdom. I think only old people really believe that. And counting myself on the other side of 50, I'm one of them. Though on a particular subject of justice, Socrates gently argues that this might not be so. All the same, his views of interest. As a man of considerable wealth, Cephalus sees the issue partly in economic terms. Justice for him is repaying one's debts and not telling any lies. Cephalus proves to be a somewhat simplistic thinker here, I think, and his definition may be easier to follow for those of comfortable means. Rather than hurt the old man's feelings, Socrates merely points out that one should not repay the debt of a borrowed weapon, for example, to a man who has gone mad. Or in our own day, would we return the car keys to the owner of a car who is intoxicated, repaying that debt? But it's a weak objection, to be sure, and Socrates wants to take on some more challenging definitions. A new proposal comes from Polemarchus, who claims that justice means helping one's friends and harming one's enemies. It worked well in the bell game, anyway. Whereas the definition of Cephalus seems rather simplistic and incomplete, That of Polemarchus seems flat out wrong. What could possibly be right about taking actions based only upon who your friends are? But aha, we do that all the time, don't we? Sure we do. When you and your pledged brothers conspire to steal from another fraternity, is this not the justice that you serve? What is the limit of your loyalty to an ally? What is the limit of our own loyalty as Americans to our allies? Right? What sort of world do we create when we follow the logic of Polemarchus? Yet, I'd submit that we often do just that. So far, things look pretty dim for our friend Justice, no? But wait, I've saved the best for last. The definition of Thrasymachus. Justice, he says, is the interest of the stronger. Introduced as a sophist, we are readily predisposed to dislike this fellow. But how do you really feel about his definition? Might makes right. It's true because I say so, or rather because my fist says so, or my nuclear device. Under such terms, there really is no justice in the way we'd like to think about it. Rather, in the words of Marlon Brando in The Godfather, and here begins and ends my acting career, you come to me. You ask for justice. There is no justice, only revenge. Maybe I shouldn't retire so quickly. This, however, is an uncomfortable, if not cynical, definition of justice, no? Yet consider how power has defined justice throughout history. How was it right for Anglos to take land from Native Americans? How is that just? How is it just to enslave Africans? Right? More controversially, how is it right for the U.S. to take 51% of Mexico in 1848? I can enroll in my class next semester and get the answer to that. So you must be asking yourself, what is the point of this philosophy and history lesson? Normally, Dr. Warner is a lot more jovial. If the gentleman's rule is about right actions, about ethics, about determining justice in our community, then these ancient texts have given us plenty to chew on. If justice and the rule are so complex that they require continual clarification and definition, what sort of process will work on our campus? What sort of process does work? At this point, let's consider the practical applications of the rule, or rather, the rule in process, or the rule as a verb. Think of the system of student justice and ethics at Wabash as a triangle, or a pyramid, with apologies to Professor Murillo. At the point of the pyramid sits deans, raters, and Warner. In reality, though, comparatively few cases of student misbehavior or disagreement reach that point. I can, however, report that I participated in several cases that have reached our desk in the first few weeks, and some of you know that firsthand. So I'm learning the art of rule interpretation under the able guidance of Dean Raters. One general principle I've discovered is that if the deans need to become involved, either one, the action is particularly egregious, or the rule has failed us among the student body. Most issues are dealt with before they reach the dean's office. Below the dean level, we find the stratum of student leadership, fraternity officers, independent resident assistants. These gentlemen work with their populations to clarify the principles of the gentleman's rule as necessary. In 9 years at Wabash, I have witnessed countless examples of student leadership in this vein. In my new perspective from Center Hall, I now understand my job is enabling student leaders to solve their own problems whenever possible. This can be time-consuming and messy. Legalism has fewer loose ends. Yet in the end, this makes our community much stronger. Not all issues are brought to the attention of student leadership either. Many times, friends or roommates recognize their responsibility to call out their brothers on their actions. Thus, your circle of student colleagues represents another stratum of the rule triangle. My second semester at Wabash, a student uttered a rather inappropriate message in my large survey class. Several students came rushing up to me later to apologize for the freshman, while others pulled him aside for a talking to. And they weren't from his house. Okay. These students were concerned that as a new professor, that I might be offended. I don't think I knew my sense of humor yet, so I wasn't. But this story has a happy ending, and that's that the student matured and eventually graduated with distinction on his comps. He grew up. I watched it happen. The final level, at the base of the triangle, and therefore the most frequently engaged setting, is the conversation that we all have within ourselves as individuals. At the end of the day, as you meditate or sit silently on a Sunday, do you think back about how you might have acted differently? Is your instinct to ask yourself, could I have acted more responsibly? If you do not have such moments, get thee to a church soon, or wherever else works for you. But I know that you all do experience this. This reflection in your idle moments can be powerful as you treat the rule as a verb in your own life. You are taking care to be a good Confucian scholar and a good Wabash gentleman. Prior to leaving the subject of the practical application of the rule, I should add something about the role of staff and faculty. Although these colleagues are not my primary audience this morning, it is important to note that staff and faculty also play a role in this process. We are a small, interactive community, so we should all be bound by a code of ethics that is particular to our own Confucian station in life. Moreover, and more importantly, conversations in staff and faculty offices can also prove valuable as clarification for the rule. Okay, I've probably stretched your mind or bored you sufficiently with my musings long enough now. But trust me, I could go on further, but I won't. I do invite you to have further discussions with me at any time about this, because I think it's important. But for today, I want to finish with some advice. So wake up the lad next to you. I don't see any sleeping, but maybe. Gentlemen, the rule is ours. Embrace it. The rule is uniquely Wabash, but the precious rule is fragile. Some people say the rule is not effective, that it is broken, or even that the rule is dead. The rule is often misunderstood. Staff and faculty are not always patient with the process of the rule. I speak for myself. Sometimes desiring more publicly firm action on the part of our office. There are students suffering from an excessive attitude of entitlement who also do not realize the most salient of truths about this rule. There are two sides, represented by the words freedom and responsibility. The freedom that you have as Wabash men, the freedom that other college students do not have, comes at the price of continued responsibility. And I'm going to repeat that because that's your takeaway message today. The freedom that you have as Wabash men, the freedom that other college students do not have, comes at the price of continued responsibility. There's your verb. Thus, the rule is a verb, a continuing process of clarification, education, and right action. We're bound together as a community by the rule. It is, in effect, our covenant. Gentlemen, I implore you to defend the rule. Defend the gentleman's rule by living according to its precepts. Defend the gentleman's rule by reflecting on your own actions and those of your brothers. Defend the rule by demonstrating true responsibility. With these actions, you can silence the critics of the rule. By your actions, you will prove that the pursuit of justice is more than simply the pursuit of revenge or the small-minded impulse to follow your friends when you know that it is not right. Think critically, and then you will act responsibly, you will lead effectively, and you will lead humanely. With the rule at your side, you will indeed become Wabash men. Thank you.